They wrote all the songs from the weather. You'll learn that later. We have a whole lecture on that, so we'll pass on that. Now, the Apollo 11 mission is the most famous because man landed on the moon. But from a philosophical point of view, the Apollo 8 mission was just as important. The Apollo 8 mission was the first time that man, with a capital M, went to the moon. Now, they didn't land on the moon. They went around the moon. But even so, it was the first time somebody got into some kind of machine and went away from the Earth in the direction of deep space. Because even with the previous missions, they'd always be going around the Earth. And now, for the first time, they'd be going off into deep space. Now, this was the ultimate quarterback football bomb. You know, a quarterback doesn't throw the ball where the receiver is. The quarterback throws the ball where the receiver's going to be when the ball arrives. So it takes 2.5 days to reach the moon. So that rocket was aiming for a point in space that was empty. But if their calculations were right, the moon would be there 2.5 days later. So you got to be good with the slide rule and the calculator. Not only that, but they weren't aiming for the moon. They were aiming for a point 60 miles ahead of them. Because if they arrived 60 miles ahead of the moon, then they would be caught by the gravity of the moon, and they would start to go around the moon. What happened if they got there a couple hours too soon? Bye-bye. They wouldn't be caught by the lunar gravity, and they would, as we're speaking today, they would be exiting our solar system and heading out, never to be heard from again. And what if they got there 2 hours too late? They would arrive on the moon like Manicotti. Right? They would just crash into the surface of the moon. So they had to arrive 60 miles in front of the moon just at the right time. So that in and of itself is a remarkable feat. Now there was an interesting byproduct of this mission. As the astronauts said, we went to explore the moon and we discovered the Earth. When they looked behind them as they were going to the moon, they were the first, I get tingles just thinking about it. They were the first humans to ever see the Earth in its entirety. They were the first to see how beautiful the Earth was in the blackness of space. This day-glow blue, gorgeous little Christmas ornament in the middle of nothing. And they were in total awe, as anybody would. And they asked permission to take a picture, because they didn't have digital cameras. They had film, and every frame was accounted for. Picture 1 would be taken at this point, picture 2 would be taken at this point, and so forth for all 322 pictures that they had planned. So NASA said, well, if you really think it's important, go ahead and take a picture. And that's arguably one of the most famous pictures out there. Life magazine just a few years ago had released this 100 photographs that changed the world, and which one is the biggest? The picture of the Earth. That is the picture taken by the Apollo 8 guys. And of course on Save the Earth, Earth Day, and that picture is used all over the place. But that's not the full story. That picture wasn't taken that way. The picture was taken like this. This is from the original negative. You see the horizon is vertical. Just from the way they were going around the moon, the Earth appeared not on top, it appeared on the left. But someone at NASA astutely pointed out that if they turned it 90 degrees, they could call it an Earthrise, which would be very cool, as opposed, of course, to a sunrise. So now, wherever you see that picture, you see it the way it is on the right, not the way it was taken on the left. So, I'm going to finish off with this. Where's this from? So this picture is used all the time in many different incarnations. I was skiing last year in Snowbird. This is the decal you can buy for your helmet. Went to a museum in Philadelphia. Okay. Tivoli Audio, this is their ad last year in the newspaper. But now what makes this picture special? It's for, Calcutta. They want you to cross the street at the crosswalk. So now, what makes this picture special? It's just 4 guys crossing the street. I mean, this picture took them 20 minutes to make. I mean, except for the White Album, no album in Beatle history took so little time to make. But, so what's special about it? Is it the symmetry, the blue sky, the clothing? What would you say? First of all, you probably never guessed that this picture would become famous. But let's assume that I'm giving you that. It's become famous. So what makes it? So let me give you some clues. Let me show you the pictures that were not selected. They didn't pick this. And they didn't pick that. And they didn't pick that.
That looks weird.
No, they picked this. Okay? And they picked it immediately. Like there were 100 pictures, they all said, oh yeah, that's the one. Not this, not this, not this. So what is different about this? All right, so I'll give you the answer. All 8 legs are straight. Now in a parade, you would expect that, because everybody is marching in step. You could have 100 guys with their legs in the same phase of gait. But if you're randomly walking, the odds of all 4 people being in the same phase of gait is pretty low. And that's why out of 100 pictures, there was only 1 that looked like this. All the others look like 4 guys crossing the street. Now you know the secret. All right, that's it for the formal part of the lecture. You're welcome to come visit us on the Facebook page, or on the website, or the blog. This was John Lennon's Rolls Royce. And now I'm happy to entertain any questions, or if you have time we can go over some of these other stories. But go ahead and hit me with your questions. And then we're going to auction off a couple of your books. No one dares ask the first question. I know what it's like to be in the audience. Yes, young man.
Yes, I'm in 1952. Could you tell the publishing story? I don't know if the class has heard that, but I thought that was interesting. We were talking outside. Michael Jackson had the rights to the music.
Oh, so so believe it or not, the Beatles do not own the rights to their own music. When they were starting off as songwriters, somebody approached them and said, this is after their first song, Please Please Me, I like your sound, I would like to be your publisher. Would you let me be your publisher? And to them, publishing meant sheet music. You know, when you play the piano, you got sheet music. And what does a rock band care about sheet music? So they said, sure. They didn't know that publisher also means owning the rights to the song for anything and everything. And so they signed away their rights. Until 20, 30 years later, the company that owned the rights decided to auction them off, to sell them. And do you know who outbid Paul McCartney? Michael Jackson, for $65 million. Paul McCartney was not interested in spending $65 million to get his own songs back. That was when the rift between Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney started, even though they had teamed up and were, quote, good friends. Of course, in retrospect, it would have been a good deal for McCartney to cough up $65 million because it's worth a lot more now. And now it's part of Michael Jackson's estate and Sony. And Paul McCartney's a wealthy guy on the basis of his owning the rights to Grease and Buddy Holly, and of course his own post-Beatle work. And he gets royalties as a performer from the Beatles stuff, but he does not get publishing. If you want to play a Beatles song, record a Beatles song, you don't go to Paul McCartney or any of the Beatles or their estates. You have to go to Sony. All right. Any other questions? So I have a couple of books here, and I thought I'd throw out some questions here and see if anybody can guess. When the Beatles were playing in Japan in 1966, there was at the same time in Japan was an extremely famous movie actor who had announced that this would be his last movie in this action series that he'd helped make famous. Who was that actor? Who? No? What?
Sean Connery?
You already have a book. Okay, so now, second question. Yes, Sean Connery was filming You Only Live Twice. And he had decided that he had had enough of being James Bond. And he had announced that this was going to be his last movie. So, here's another James Bond related question. In which James Bond movie are the Beatles specifically mentioned by name? No one in this area is allowed to answer. Okay. It was one of the early movies. It was actually in Goldfinger. Yes.
Goldfinger?
What's that?
Is it Goldfinger?
It is Goldfinger. Why, did you guess? The,
I guessed, I didn't read the book.
oh, well then you're the winner. There's a second book, you get the first book. So, yes, in Goldfinger, go home and watch the movie. Towards the beginning of the movie, James Bond is commenting on the martini or the champagne, and he says something to the effect that drinking martini at any temperature other than 37 degrees would be like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs. Okay, it was not very flattering. But now remember, Goldfinger was produced in 1964. Okay, the early part of the Beatle career. And at this point, it was still very much the generational divide. Over 30, you thought the Beatles were awful. And Goldfinger, everybody in that movie, except for a couple of actresses maybe, certainly all the producers are over 30. So the Beatles were fair game for a little dig. Listen to that tonight. All right, name all 4 Beatles. Well, that's it for my trivia questions, unless Professor Trampolino has a. Oh, John Lennon got in trouble for saying the Beatles were more popular than.
Beer than Jesus.
Okay, good. You had your hands up first. We got it. Yes. And do you know in what context he was talking about it?
It was he was saying that the generation, the younger generation, like cares more about them per se, but not in the religious aspect. More like their attention is more grabbed by the Beatles than religion.
Well, yes, that's partially. You're probably going to go over that episode, so I'll just mention it quickly. But months before this thing exploded, he had given a 2-3 hour interview. And one little section of the interview, he had talked about how, in his opinion, the religion in England was on the wane, especially among the people of his generation. And he could have said, television is more popular than religion, or popular than Jesus. Or he could have said, football, soccer, is more relevant today than Jesus. But being in the Beatles, he just came up with the Beatles. So it wasn't a quote about how great the Beatles were. It was a quote about how, in his opinion, religion was on the wane among his generation in England. Anyway, that caused all sorts of difficulties for him, obviously. Anyway, well, that's it. I know we have 5 minutes, so if you have questions that you want to ask me personally, or if you have questions that you want to ask, I'm happy to entertain them. I don't know who's stretching and who's just having a question. But I'm assuming you were just stretching. Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.